So now let's conclude this joint. Overheads. First, the mic again. The bleed section, as you can see here, I lowered the toms a bit. Bleeding into the overhead mics, I find it cleans up the toms a bit more. No, that's just optional, really. Then let's turn directly to the overhead bus channel. Same procedure as with every channel. Let's bypass the effects, single it, and just listen to it. Okay, they may sound already pretty good as they are, but I still like to put on some major filtering first. It's set to about 12 o'clock. That gets rid of most of the chunk and the low rumbling that you do not want in the overhead mics. And you want them to be more sparkly and more presence based, so you can still further enhance this with EQing. I like to boost the overheads at 3 spots. One at around 1 kilohertz, and that gives just a bit of the hit back, a little bit of the chunk, just enough to that it's still pleasant. And then boost around this general area between 2 and 4K somewhere to give them a bit more presence. And then with a high shelf around 7 kilohertz to give them more air and more spark. So let's listen before and after. And that's that. As you can see, I also put a sidechain compression for the overheads. Line being blue indicates that the bus send channel with the sidechain compression is set as pre-effects. So the signal is being split before the insert effects and mixed together behind them. So let's just turn to that channel. It's this one here. This compression is set for more sustain, therefore fast attack and a bit slower release, and a harder ratio around 5:1, and then adjust the threshold again. Let's listen to the bus channel itself again, and then with the actual overhead channel. So as you can see, it also puts again very much punch into the snare that's bleeding into the overheads. So it's all coming together. Now, room mics, or at the Avatar kit, they're called ambient mics. Let's turn to the mics themselves again. In the closed room mic, I only have the snare in it. That adds a lot of the snare tone to the whole drum setup, which I like. Then the mid room mic, I also only have the snare in it, and it's also mixed not too much. This is set to about -14 dB, so that's just again a little bit more of room to the snare. I like to have a lot of room in the snare to make it more massive. It's just again my preference. And then here in the amp far mic, as you can see, over the time of tweaking, I set the snare a bit back and the hi-hats a bit back. Also all the cymbals, especially the cymbals, I don't want them to be everywhere in the stereo image. I still like them to be locatable, whether they're more on the left or more on the right, so I take those a bit out from the room mics. But for some reason I kept the toms in there pretty much. But again, just try this out for yourself to whatever you like, whether you want to have the cymbals nice and spread and filling up the whole stereo image, or if you want them to be more clearer on their position. For faster songs, I recommend to have not too much of the room in it, so everything is still very much locatable and not constantly everywhere. And when you have very slow songs, then more of the room mics also gives more ambient feel to it, which enhances the feel of the song again. Now let's turn to the bus channel of the ambient / room mics. Same procedure as every time. So let's just listen to this. As you can hear, there's very much of the snare in it because of the amp close and the amp mid mic. So first thing to do is compression. Approach again, more sustain, more aggression, not too much of punch. So attack is very fast, release a bit slower. Ratio I like to set to 3:1, and then apply the threshold a bit, so you get a nice punch in the snare that's bleeding into the amp mics, and you get also more aggression for the cymbals in there. That adds more spice to it. Now, next thing is filtering. There's just some light high pass filtering. Again, getting rid of some lower stuff that you do not want in there. Just cleans it up. Very important now, again, EQing. I like to boost around 200 Hz. That gives again more emphasis on the massiveness of the snare. Then I like to cut out the mids around 400 to 500 Hz, somewhere in this general area, basically, just to clean it up some more because room mics are very mid-based, and then put more emphasis on the whole higher mid-range and the air section. So I like to boost around 2 to 3 kilohertz, and then with the high shelf around 5 kilohertz. And you'll notice this gives a whole lot emphasis on the cymbals. So let's listen in before and after. To me it sounds much more clearer and more aggressive, so fittingly for metal. Now this ambient bus channel is also using the same sidechain compression channel as the overheads. Also fully mixed, also pre-effect setup, and that's already concluding my superior drummer setup. Woohoo! There you go. Nice aggressive drums. In case you didn't figure out from which song this beat is, here's a little hint. Get it? Okay. Now, once this is all set up, what I do is I route everything that has to do with the snare. So that would be the snare bus channel, and also the sidechain compression channel for the snare. I route those to the output 3/4. So instead of going through the usual 1-2, it's going through 3-4. And everything that has to do with the overheads, the hi-hats and the ambient mics, I route through the output 5/6. So if you recall, at the very beginning, we loaded Superior Drummer with exactly those 3 outputs as channels in here. So as I play this beat, notice now the channel 1-2 has the kick drum in it and also the toms, because I didn't change the output of the toms. 3-4 has the snare, and 5-6 all the overhead stuff. So now what we do is apply a sidechain reverb effect to the snare and the kick drum. So let's just right click and insert an effect channel. And as an effect, you choose a reverb. Now there it is, reverb, Moonworks. Okay, and there we have it. You can start off, for example, with the Plate Vintage preset, and then you lower the pre-delay to about 60 milliseconds and turn on the wet only button. Now if your reverb in whatever DAW you're using or whatever reverb plugin, if it doesn't have this wet only button, just turn up the mix to 100% so you only have the reverb in it and not the original drum hit. Now what we do, we go to the snare channel, go to Send Effect. In here we choose the FX1 Roomworks. That's this bus channel that we just created. Turn it on and set the mix to about -2.5, somewhere in that area. We do the same for the kick drum, but we set the mix not too high, maybe to about -7. Now what happens is the original snare and kick hit are going through your DAW unaffected, but the split signal is being affected with a very heavy reverb, and this also only has the reverb, not the original hit. We just mixed those two together. We still got the original massive hit and some additional reverb to it, and that adds a whole lot more tone and beauty to it. So let's listen in before and after. Okay, as you can hear, and that's a whole lot to it. Actually a bit too much. So we go to the reverb again. Maybe put some pre-filtering in here. The high pass we can put a bit higher, maybe to 400. And also turn down the mix again. So mix this to about -4. This one perhaps to -9. Now let's try it out. Now this, as you can hear, adds so much more massiveness to it. And as you compare before and after again, you'll notice it also sounds so much nicer and also makes your drums sit so beautifully in the mix without sounding so dry. So and that concludes my whole drum setup for my metal production. I hope you learned something out of that, and stay tuned for the next coming parts.